Well, this is going swimmingly so far. Good morning. It is now April, and if you've been on this channel for any amount of time, you know that April is Victorian Skirt Month. So for my pattern, I'm going to be using the Truly Victorian 10 Gore Princess skirt. I have never made a skirt with this many panels before, so we're just gonna have to see how it goes. And for fabric, I'm going to be using something out of my stash, which, don't judge me, I have accidentally bought this fabric 3 times without realizing I was buying the same fabric. I just walked into Joann's and was like, wow, that's an awesome color. And then I'd like get home and realize that I got it, but I did that like 3 times, not just twice, so anyways. But it's gorgeous. It's literally just a quilting cotton. It's called Berry. The one problem is that it's different dye lots. So I don't even know if you can tell, but I have this 1 yard piece and then this 2 yard piece, and they are like very slightly different colors. This pattern is supposed to be like a floor length skirt. I'm not doing that, A, because of fabric constraints, and B, because of like job constraints. I don't want to wear a floor length skirt to work, so I'm not going to. So what that means is I'm going to have to trace out the cut line that I want to actually follow, because I'm not cutting the pattern in case I want to end up making a full length skirt at some point for like, I don't know, a formal event. What I ended up doing for this was just like holding the pattern piece up against myself and running a measuring tape down until I got to what I thought was a good length. That was 31 inches from the natural waist marker. Okay, I have laid out all 5 of my main pattern pieces, not like the little tiny ones. And on 1 yard of fabric, I can fit just about 4, and I've got my cut line right here, so I think I can probably, fingers crossed, I can probably manage this out of 3 yards. I'm going to make a virtue out of a necessity here and cut the front and the side front panels out of my 1 yard piece of fabric, and then do the side and the back panels out of my 2 yard piece of fabric, so that, you know, I don't think that it's going to be a very noticeable color difference, but if it is, hopefully it'll look intentional, because it actually is this time. This pattern also calls for flatlining in canvas. You can see how like the line of the front of the pattern doesn't quite line up with the grain lines. This is going to be very slightly on the bias, which means that it'll have like a nice slight stretch and flex around the body and make this a little bit more comfortable to wear. Sir, is this really necessary? There is one difference between this and the flatlining that I've done in the past, which is that this is a partial flatlining, which means that I do need to kind of turn this under and steam it down so that this edge doesn't unravel while the skirt is being worn. So what the pattern says to do is to start by putting the center back panels together. You can see my tacking coming out here a little bit. And then basically just add panels on until you get all the way around to the center front. What I've elected to do instead is to put all of my back panels together and then all of my front panels together, and then I'm just going to do all the stitching on the back panels and on the front panels. I've already started stitching the center front seam, if you can see that here. Cat break. Hi. What you doing, pretty Angie? Oh, he's so baby. Look at that cat. So I took some time away from camera to fold down and tack down the seam allowances, kind of neaten everything up before I put the two halves of the skirt together, which I've just started doing. This is the side seam, and then I realized, wait, I should probably just do a quick little update. So here's the skirt all kind of laid out. You can see how incredibly swooshy it's going to be. Center back opening, this is going to be the first side seam. So I'm going to be putting this together and putting in the pockets. And then right here is going to be the center front eventually. And over here will be the second side seam. Hello. So it's been a couple days. I finished the side seams finally. So now literally the only couple things we have to do are finishing all of the seams and adding the closures at the back, which is my least favorite part in any project. For finishing the seams, I'm going to be starting with the center front seam. This one I will fell to either side. The other ones are all just over to one side, but symmetry is a thing that I require in my life, so here we are. And of course, even though I carefully lint rolled this before I pressed all the other seams, it is covered with cat fur again. Thank you, Angus. Felling down the seams is a much faster process than actually stitching them because it's just taking a little tiny bite of the fabric and then a fairly long stitch, like slightly more than 1/4 inch, and you put the needle as close to perpendicular to the fabric as you can, draw it through, and then repeat all the way down. When I made my first Victorian skirt, when I was finishing the pockets, basically I just took the seam allowance and folded it right over and tacked it down, but I didn't really like how that looked with just hemming it down. So for my second Victorian skirt, the one I did last year, I handled the pockets quite differently. I folded the edges in towards each other and then just blanket stitched it down. So I'm definitely gonna do this finishing method for the one I'm doing today because I just like it much better. Okay, so I have everything set up. I have skirt, iron. I am going to lint roll this again because I feel like you could probably reconstitute an entire kitten from the amount of cat fur on this thing right now. Oh my gosh. Okay, so basically it's just no, Angus, that's hot. No, you cannot get near that, sir. Brief delay. Okay, let's try this again for realsies this time. So, I'm starting with the back because I always find that easier. And I'm just folding the edges in towards each other. So, back first, then the front. You want to get the edges to match as closely as possible because otherwise the blanket stitch is not going to look right. And once you've got a couple of inches, you do not want to try and do the whole thing at once. Just iron the whole thing down flat. For this stitch, a nice trick that I like to do is to take the needle and just lay it flat against the fabric to see where I want my next stitch to be. This is a really good trick to getting evenly sized stitches. So I want my next stitch to start, let's say about here. I'm going to put my needle through both layers of the fabric, just straight down. And then I'm not going to draw it all the way through because we're making like this big loop for the majority of the stitch. And then I'm going to put it back through both layers. And here you can kind of see the size the stitch is going to be. I'm going to actually scoot my needle back over just a little bit. Yeah, I think that's better. Okay. And then I like to hold the loop out of the way while drawing the thread tight. You don't have to do this, but it's a really great way to make it not tangle during the stitch, especially if your thread is longer. And you tighten the thread down just a little bit. Okay. And then from here, I'm going to do just like the tiniest loop back over the top. Put this through one more time. And you want this stitch to come out as close as possible to the last stitch without going through it. And then you just draw that loop down, and there you go. Blanket stitch. The next step after finishing the long seams is trying this on to make sure that the placement for the back closures is correct. I've never had an issue with fit from Truly Victorian patterns, but you never know with the new pattern until you try it. Because I'm planning on wearing this over at least a couple layers since the skirt comes up so high, I've added an extra layer even though it's too hot to be wearing 2 layers right now. Okay, so I'm really glad that I tried this on because the fit is overall good. I like the length, I like the pocket placement, but once it gets up into the waist part that has the canvas, like right up here, I have like a couple extra inches in this part. So when I'm pinching it shut, sorry, I'm gonna try and do this so you can actually see it. So when I'm like pinching it shut at the top here, you can see how much extra I have. So I am going to have to rectify that before I do anything with adding the closures. I don't curve as much as this pattern does, so I just have to adjust the line of the back so that it fits me better. Okay, so here we have, you know, the original line of the pattern, and then here's the line that I put in based on trying to measure this myself. This is a lot easier if you have somebody else to help you. As a note, I'm not actually planning on cutting the pattern down to this new line. I want to keep this kind of size adjustable, so what I'm gonna do is fold the fabric back over, and then if I need to size this up later, I totally can. I'm finally on the second to last step of this very long-lasting project, which is closures. Now, the pattern says that I should close this with hooks and eyes, but the closure is, I mean, this is like 14 inches, and it says to place the hooks and eyes once every inch. And if I put 14 hooks and eyes into the back of this skirt, I will never wear it. So instead, I ran out and I bought an invisible zipper, and that is what I am putting in now. Full disclosure, I'm not going to go over how to put in an invisible zipper. I had to look up a couple tutorials to do it myself, so there's really no point in me trying to instruct you on how to do an invisible zipper if I was looking up instructions myself. It's pretty impossible to back my needle through the zipper fabric. I have tried, so I am checking the placement of every single stitch before I put it in. As for the instructions in the pattern, once I've leveled the hem, I'm finishing it with just a double folded hemline. And so the first thing I'm going to do is iron that, and then as I iron it, I just go ahead and tack it down so that I don't have to worry about any pins, and then I just finish it with a quick hemming stitch. When hemming the edge down, I'm spacing these stitches a little bit more closely together than I did on the long seams, just for a little bit of added security. At this point, I was so ready to be done with the project that I failed to actually get any footage of me finishing the edges after I put the zipper in, or any footage of me making the bias tape that I'm using to bind the top edge of this. So about 80% through of actually stitching the bias tape on, I finally remembered to pick up the camera again. To finish the ends of the bias tape, I'm just tucking the raw edge under once and then tucking the whole thing under again, so that if I end up needing to size up this garment later on, I don't have to end up taking out the bias tape and then stitching new bias tape onto the bias tape that already exists. I can just unfold this piece and use it as is. This does make the back hem of the skirt a little bit thick, but such is life. The rest of the seam is a more normal thickness, so I'll just go ahead and pin that down normally. After I pinned this, I ended up going back and pressing it off camera before I started stitching it down with a hem stitch.